All right. Good morning, P5. I'm hoping that this works today. I thought this would at least give us a chance to read together. And I'm going to start with chapter 2 today. So, what I encourage you to do is follow along with me in your book. I have this version. Maybe the image is coming up backwards, but you can see from the cover, any of the page number references that I give will be from this book. If you have a different issue, that's okay. You'll just have to follow along with the chapters, okay? So we're going to start with chapter 2, and this is where the real story begins. Chapter 1 is all about adult Carrie. She's a grown-up with her own children, going back to a place from her childhood. And we're now going back in time with Carrie to when she was a young girl, only 12 and a half years old. So I'm going to begin chapter 2. And in my version of the book, I also have a picture. It's always really important to take a look at the pictures because, as you know, we can see a lot of details that help us to better understand what's going on and the characters. And here we can see Carrie, her little brother Nick, and we see a woman here. We don't know who she is yet, but we do know that they've got their bags with them. So the children are ready to be evacuated. Okay, here we go. Chapter 2. He threw up all over Miss Fazakerly's skirt. He had been feeling sick ever since they left the main junction and climbed into the joggling, jolting little train for the last lap of their journey. But the sudden whistle had finished him. Such a noise. It seemed to split the sky open. That's a great metaphor that the authors put in right away, so I find that one very interesting. It's enough to frighten the dead, Miss Fazakerly said, mopping her skirt and Nick's face with her handkerchief. He lay back limp as a rag and let her do it, the way he always let people do things for him, not lifting a finger. Poor lamb, Miss Fazakerly said, but Carrie looked stern. It's all his own fault. He's been stuffing his face ever since we left London, greedy pig, dustbin. He had not only eaten his own packed lunch, sandwiches and cold sausages and bananas, but most of Carrie's as well. She had let him have it to comfort him because he minded leaving home and their mother more than she did, or had looked as if he minded more. She thought now that it was just one of his acts, She thought now that it was one of his acts put on to get sympathy and chocolate. He had had all her chocolate too. I knew he'd be sick, she said smugly. So here we have a good idea about the relationship between Carrie and Nick. Think about the responsibilities that she has towards her little brother because she's older, and think about how they both must be feeling. Okay, Nick is really showing his feelings and Carrie is not. We need to consider the reason why. Why is Carrie not showing her feelings the same way that Nick is? Okay? He might have warned me then, or you might have warned me then, mightn't you? Miss Fazakerly said. Not unkindly. She was one of the kindest teachers in the school, but Carrie wanted to cry suddenly. If she had been Nick, she would have cried, or at least put on a hurt face. Being Carrie, she stared crossly out of the carriage window at the big mountain on the far side of the valley. It was brown and purple on the top and green lower down, streaked with silver trickles of water and dotted with sheep. Sheep and mountains. Oh, it'll be such fun, their mother had said when she kissed them goodbye at the station. Living in the country instead of the stuffy old city. You'll love it. You see if you don't. As if Hitler had arranged this old war for their benefit, just so that Carrie and Nick could be sent away in a train with gas masks slung over their shoulders and their names on cards round their necks. Labeled like parcels. Caroline Wendy Willow and Nicholas Peter Willow, only with no address to be sent to. None of them, not even the teachers, knew where they were going. Well, that's part of the adventure, Carrie's mother had said. And not just to cheer them up. It was her nature to look on the bright side. If she found herself in hell, Carrie thought now, she'd just say, well, at least we'll be warm. Thinking of her mother, always making the best of things, or pretending to, when the train began to move, she had stopped smiling. Carrie nearly did cry. There was a lump like a pill stuck in her throat. She swallowed hard and pulled faces. I think it's important to pause here and think about the mother, how she's behaving. Do we think she's as enthusiastic as she's pretending to be with the children? And if not, why is she behaving like this? Why is the mother trying to show them all of the positive things about their trip? Have a think about that, because we'll be discussing it tomorrow. The train was slowing. "Here we are," Miss Fazakerly said. "Collect your things. Don't leave anything. Take care of Nick, Carrie." Carrie scowled. She loved Nick, loved him so much sometimes that it gave her a pain, but she hated to be told to do something she was going to do anyway. And she was bored with Nick at the moment. That dying duck look as he struggled to get his case down from the rack. "Leave it to me, silly baby," she said, jumping up on the seat. Dust flew, and he screwed up his face. "You're making me sneeze," he complained. "Don't bounce, Carrie." They all seemed to have more luggage than when they had started. Suitcases that had once been light now felt as if they were weighed down with stones, and got heavier as they left the small station and straggled down a steep cinder path. Carrie had Nick's case as well as her own, and a carrier bag with a broken string handle. She tucked it under one arm, but it kept slipping backwards, and her gas mask banged her knee as she walked. "Someone help Caroline, please," Miss Fazakerly cried, rushing up and down the line of children like a sheepdog. Someone did. Carrie felt the carrier bag go from under her arm, then one suitcase. Oh, sorry, my cat has come downstairs, so you might hear her in the video. Shh. It was a bigger boy. Carrie blushed, but he wasn't a senior. He wore a cap like all boys under 16, and although he was tall, he didn't look very much older than she was. She glanced sideways and said, "Thank you so much," in a grown-up voice like her mother's. He grinned shyly back. He had steel-rimmed spectacles, a few spots on his chin. He said, "Well, I suppose this is what they call our ultimate destination. Not much of a place, is it?" They were off the cinder track now, walking down a hilly street where small, dark houses opened straight onto the pavement. There was sun on the mountain above them, but the town was in shadow. The air struck chill on their cheeks and smelled dusty. "Bound to be dirty," Carrie said. "A coal mining town." "I didn't mean dirt, just that it's not big enough to have a good public library." It seemed a funny thing to bother about at the moment. Carrie said, "The first place was bigger. Where we stopped at the junction?" She peered at his label and read his name, Albert Sandwich. She said, "If you came earlier on in the alphabet, you could have stayed there. You only just missed it. They divided us after the R's. Do your friends call you Allie or Bert?" Let's pause there because Carrie's just said something very important. If you came earlier on in the alphabet, you could have stayed there. You only just missed it. They divided us after the R's. So we have a whole bunch of children on the train being evacuated from the city to the countryside. And the way they decide where the children go is just the alphabetical order of their family names. So Carrie, whose last name is Willow, begins with a W, and Albert Sandwich, whose last name begins with an S. So they've ended up in the same place by chance, but it's a very random way, I think, to divide the children. But I think that can tell us just how many children this was affecting, that was the only way that they could figure out how to divide them, in a completely random way. Do your friends call you Allie or Bert?" "I don't care for my name to be abbreviated," he said, "nor do I like being called jam or jelly or even peanut butter." He spoke firmly, but Carrie thought he looked anxious. "I hadn't thought of sandwiches," she said. "Only of the town Sandwich in Kent, because my granny lives there. Though my dad says she'll have to move now in case the Germans land on the coast." She thought of the Germans landing, and her grandmother running away with her things on a cart like a refugee in a newspaper picture. She gave a loud, silly laugh and said, "If they did, my gran'd give them what for. She's not frightened of anyone. I bet she could even stop Hitler. Go up on her roof and pour boiling oil down." Albert looked at her, frowning. "I doubt if that would be very helpful. Old people aren't much use in a war. Like kids." best out of the way. His grave tone made Carrie feel foolish. She wanted to say it was only a joke about boiling oil, but they had arrived at a building with several steps leading up and were told to get into single file so that their names could be checked at the door. Nick was waiting there, holding Miss Fazakerly's hand. She said, "Oh, there you are, darling. There she is. Didn't I tell you?" And to Carrie, "Don't lose him again." She ticked them off on her list, saying aloud, 2 willows, 1 sandwich. Nick clung to Carrie's sleeve as they went through the door into a long, dark room with pointed windows. It was crowded and noisy. Someone said to Carrie, "Would you like a cup of tea, Bach? And a bit of cake now?" She was a cheerful, plump woman with a sing-song Welsh voice. Carrie shook her head. She felt cake would choke her. "Stand by there, then," the woman said. "There by the wall with the others, and someone will choose you." Carrie looked round, bewildered, and saw Albert Sandwich. She whispered, "What's happening?" And he said, "A kind of cattle auction, it seems." He sounded calmly disgusted. He gave Carrie her suitcase, then marched to the end of the hall, sat down on his own, and took a book out of his pocket. Carrie wished she could do that, sit down and read as if nothing else mattered, but she had already begun to feel ill with shame at the fear that no one would choose her, the way she always felt when they picked teams at school. Suppose she was left to the last? She dragged Nick into the line of waiting children and stood, eyes on the ground, hardly daring to breathe. When someone called out, "A nice little girl for Mrs. Davies now," she felt she would suffocate. She looked up, but unfocused her eyes so that passing faces blurred and swam in front of her. Nick's hand tightened in hers. She looked at his white face and the traces of sick round his mouth and wanted to shake him. No one would take home a boy who looked like that, so pale and delicate. They would think he was bound to get ill and be a trouble to them. She said in a low, fierce voice, "Why don't you smile and look nice?" And he blinked with surprise, looking so small and so sweet that she softened. She said, "Oh, it's all right. I'm not cross. I won't leave you." Minutes passed, feeling like hours. Children left the line and were taken away. Only unwanted ones left, Carrie thought. She and Nick, and a few tough-looking boys, and an ugly girl with a squint who had 2 little sisters. And Albert Sandwich, who was still sitting quietly on his suitcase, reading his book and taking no notice. He didn't care. Carrie tossed her head and hummed under her breath to show she didn't either. I wonder, at this point we can stop and think, do you believe Carrie? That she doesn't really care? I think looking at that description, we can have an idea that she might just be pretending. Someone had stopped in front of her. Someone said, "Oh, surely you can take 2, Miss Evans." "2 girls, perhaps. Not a boy and a girl, I'm afraid. I've only the 1 room, see, and my brother is particular." Particular about what? Carrie wondered. But Miss Evans looked nice. A little like a red squirrel Carrie had once seen, peering round a tree in a park. Reddish-brown hair and bright button eyes, and a shy, quivering look. I think this description, Carrie's interpretation of what Miss Evans looks like and what she reminds her of, the simile, the comparison that she uses, can give us a good idea as to what Miss Evans' character could turn out to be like. Carrie said, "Nick sleeps in my room at home because he has bad dreams sometimes. I always look after him, and he's no trouble at all." Miss Evans looked doubtful. "Well, I don't know what my brother will say. Perhaps I can chance it." She smiled at Carrie. "There's pretty eyes you have, girl, like green glass." Carrie smiled back. People didn't often notice her when Nick was around. His eyes were dark blue, like their mother's. She said, "Oh, Nick's the pretty one, really." Miss Evans walked fast. She was a little woman, not much taller than Carrie, but she seemed as strong as a railway porter, carrying their cases as if they weighed nothing. I'm going to stop here because, again, we have a description of Miss Evans, but this one does not seem to be quite the same as what Carrie thought when she first saw her. So having Carrie's thoughts and Miss Evans' actions being different from one another can give us again something to consider when we think about what Miss Evans' character will be like. Out of the hall, down the street, they stopped outside a grocery store with the name Samuel Isaac Evans above the door, and Miss Evans took a key from her bag. She said, "There's a back way, and you'll use that, of course, but we'll go through the front for the once, as my brother's not here." The shop was dim and smelled mustily pleasant. Candles and tarred kindling and spices, Carrie thought, wrinkling her nose. A door at the back led into a small room with a huge desk almost filling it. "My brother's office," Miss Evans said in a hushed voice, and hurried them through into a narrow, dark hall with closed doors and a stair rising up. It was darker here than the shop, and there was a strong smell of polished linoleum, a shining glass sea with rugs scattered like islands. Not a speck of dust anywhere. Miss Evans looked down at their feet. "Better change into your slippers before we go up to your bedroom." "We haven't got any," Carrie said. She meant to explain that there hadn't been room in their cases, but before she could speak, Miss Evans turned bright red and said quickly, "Oh, I'm so sorry. How silly of me. Why should you? Never mind, as long as you're careful and tread on the drugget." Now, the drugget is a new vocabulary word for me. I don't have my dictionary with me, but I'll have to go and look it up. But I imagine the description so far of the house is that it's spotless. There's not a speck of dust anywhere. So I think that if Miss Evans wants them to tread or walk on the drugget, that it must be some sort of a covering for the stairs to protect the carpeting. But I'll look it up in the dictionary afterwards, and maybe you could do that too at home if you have the time. I'll continue. A strip of white cloth covered the middle of the stair carpet. If I had only read further, I would have seen that is the drugget. The author has told us it's the strip of white cloth covering the middle of the stair. They trod on this as they climbed, looking back from the top. Carrie saw the marks of their rubber-soled shoes and felt guilty, though it wasn't her fault. Nick whispered, "She thinks we're poor children, too poor to have slippers," and giggled. Carrie supposed he was right. Nick was good at guessing what people were thinking, but she didn't feel like giggling. Everywhere was so tidy and clean it made her despair. She thought she would never dare touch anything in this house in case she left marks. She wouldn't dare breathe. Even her breath might be dirty. Miss Evans was looking at Nick. "What did you say, dear?" she asked, but didn't wait for an answer. "Here's the bathroom," she said, proudly it seemed. "Hot and cold running water and a flush toilet. And your room just by here." Now again, a flush toilet is something that we all expect to have in our homes now, but remembering the setting of this story, that it takes place during the time of World War II, which occurred between 1939 and 1945, not everybody had flush toilets. So that little comment gives us a good idea about the setting again. "And your room, just by here." It was a small room with 2 narrow beds and a hooked rug between them. A wardrobe and a wicker chair and a large framed notice on the wall. The black letters said, "The eye of the Lord is upon you." Miss Evans saw Carrie looking at this. She said, "My brother is very strong chapel, so you'll have to be especially good Sundays. No games or books, see? Oh, except the Bible, of course." The children stared at her. She smiled shyly. "It may not be what you're used to, but it's better to get things straight from the start, isn't it? Mr. Evans is a good man, but strict. Manners and tidiness and keeping things clean. He says dirt and sloppy habits are an insult to the Lord. So you will be good, won't you? You look like good children." It was almost as if she were pleading with them, asking them to be good so that she wouldn't get into trouble. Carrie was sorry for her, though she felt very uncomfortable. Neither she nor Nick were particularly tidy. At home, in their warm, muddly house, no one had expected them to be. Millie, their maid, always picked up their toys and made their beds and put their clothes away. Carrie said, "We'll try to be good, Miss Evans." I think this paragraph can also show us that Carrie and Nick are going to be in for some changes. At their home, they're used to having a maid who's doing their work for them, and now they're really on their own. They don't have the same sort of privileges and benefits that they had at home, and they're going to have to learn very quickly, I think, to be autonomous. We have a good idea as well about what Mr. Evans is like based on Miss Evans' description of him, even though we haven't met him yet. Okay, Carrie said, "We'll try to be good, Miss Evans." "Oh, call me Auntie," Miss Evans said. "Auntie Louise. Or Auntie Lou, if that's easier. But you'd best call my brother Mr. Evans. You see, he's a counselor." She paused and then went on in the same proud tone she had used when she showed them the bathroom. "Mr. Evans is a very important man. He's at a council meeting just now. I think I'd best give you your supper before he comes back. Hadn't I?" They had a good supper of eggs and milk and crunchy fresh bread in the kitchen, which was as clean as the rest of the house, but more cheerful with a big range fire that threw out heat like a furnace. Miss Evans didn't eat with them, but stood by the table like a waitress in a restaurant, taking the plates to the sink as soon as they'd cleared them, and sweeping up crumbs round their chairs before they had finished drinking their milk. She didn't actually say, "Oh, please hurry up, oh, please hurry up," but she might just as well have done. Her mouth twitched as if she were muttering it inwardly. Her eyes kept darting to the clock on the mantelpiece, and there were red, nervous spots on her cheek. So this is Carrie making an inference. She's using the information that she has, Miss Evans' behavior, and deciding that this behavior means that she really wants them to hurry up. She made the children nervous too. When she said, "What about bed now?" they were more than glad to escape from the kitchen, where the very important Counselor Evans might appear any minute. As they went upstairs, Miss Evans rolled up the drugget behind them. "Oh, Mr. Evans doesn't like to see it down," she explained when she caught Carrie's eye. "I just put it there while he's out to keep the carpet spick and span. It's a new one, you see, lovely deep pile, and Mr. Evans doesn't want it trodden on." "How are you supposed to get up the stairs then?" Nick said. "Walk on the ceiling or fly like a bird?" Well, of course," Miss Evans laughed rather breathlessly. "Of course you have to walk on it, but sometimes, but not too often. Mr. Evans said twice a day would be quite enough. You see, 4 of us going up and down twice a day, morning and evening, makes 16 times altogether. And Mr. Evans thinks that's quite enough traipsing. So if you could try to remember to bring down all the things you'll want for the day in the morning—" "But the bathroom's upstairs," Nick said in an outraged voice. She looked at him apologetically. "Yes, I know, dear, but if you want to, go anywhere, there's one at the end of the yard. Mr. Evans doesn't use it, of course. It wouldn't be dignified for him to be seen going there, not a man in his position, when all the neighbors know he's got one indoors. But I use it. And though it's an earth closet, it's quite nice and clean. So this earth closet is, I don't know in Canada what we would call an outhouse, where it's an outdoor toilet that does not use the water system." Okay. Nick stared as if he couldn't believe his ears. Carrie nudged him gently and said, "Oh, that'll be fun, Nick, won't it? Like the one at the farm where we stayed last summer." "Spiders!" Nick's eyes rounded with remembered horror. "There were spiders!" "God's creatures," Miss Evans said, "just like you, dear." "Not like me. Not like me at all." Nick's voice rose in a loud, breathy cry. "I don't have hundreds and hundreds of creepy crawly legs, and I don't eat flies for my dinner or spin sticky stuff out of my tummy. That's disgusting. Spiders is disgusting, horrible and yucky and disgusting." "Bathroom for you," Carrie said, marching him in. "If you don't shut up now, I'll squeeze a cold flannel right down the back of your neck." She had closed the door. When Nick was quiet, which was almost at once, cold water was almost as hateful as spiders, Miss Evans whispered timidly through it, "Oh, do be quick, dear. Time's getting on." They couldn't be very quick because there was no electric light upstairs, and they had to manage with the candle Carrie was holding. She couldn't find Nick's face flannel by its flickering light, and he wouldn't use hers. And their mother had screwed up the tube of toothpaste so tightly that the lid wouldn't budge. "Have to go without cleaning your teeth just for once," Carrie said. "I won't. My mouth feels all furry and yucky. Horrible, Carrie. Beastly and horrible and disgusting." A door banged downstairs and stopped him mid-wail, mouth hanging open. He looked at Carrie with eyes like black pits. "Oh," he said, "Carrie." Her own heart was thumping, banging about in her chest like a tennis ball. "Come on," she said, and whisked him out of the bathroom. Miss Evans was standing outside. "Into bed now," she said softly, hustling them past her, then began scuttering backwards and forwards like a small frightened mouse, picking up the things they had dropped, clothes in the bedroom, toothpaste tube in the bathroom. "Oh dear," she was saying under her breath. "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear." "Lou!" a man's voice shouted. "Lou, what are you up to?" "Coming, Samuel," Miss Evans called from the landing. "Just a minute." "What are you doing up there?" "I might have known, I suppose. Up and down the stairs, soon as my back's turned. Wearing out the stair carpet." Safe in bed, Carrie blew out the candle. Miss Evans shut the door. The loud, hectoring voice went on, "Messing and humbugging about, up and down, back and forth, in and out, messing and humbugging about." It was velvet dark in the room. No light from the window because the thick blackout curtains were drawn. They lay quite still in the darkness, listening to the roar of Mr. Evans' voice and the thin squeak of his sister's. Like a mouse answering a lion. This is yet another simile that the author has got in this chapter. She uses quite a few of them, and I think it helps to give us a really good picture of what's going on in the house. We have these images in our minds, for example, like a mouse answering a lion, and we can see right away, you think about the relationship between a mouse and a lion is not really equal at all. One of them is much, much more powerful, so it helps us to better understand the relationship that Mr. Evans has with his sister. Like a mouse answering a lion, Carrie thought. Then the heavy tread of feet down the passage, the bang of another door, and silence at last. For several minutes, neither of them dared to speak it. For several minutes, neither of them dared to break it. Then Nick said, "I want Mummy." Carrie got out of her bed and felt her way into his. He clutched at her and wound himself round her like an octopus, or like ivy, his cold feet in her stomach. "I want to go home," he said. "I don't like it here. I don't want to be safe in the country. I want Mummy and Millie and Dad." "You've got me." Carrie held him tight to comfort them both. She said, "It won't seem so bad in the morning." He was shaking and shivering. He whispered into her ear, "He must be an ogre, Carrie, a horrible, disgusting, real-life ogre." All right, so that's the end of chapter 2. We've had a great chance to meet the main characters, Carrie, her younger brother Nick, Mr. Evans, we've kind of met, Miss Evans, and we're set from there. So, some things to consider for tomorrow. We learn a lot about Mr. Evans, not because we meet him, but because we hear about him from Miss Evans, his sister, and because when he comes home, he basically supports everything that she's been saying with his back and forth and up and down. He's very upset that people are just moving about in the house, which seems like a very strange thing to be so worried about, because when we're in our houses, we should be comfortable to move around and go up and down and back and forth and go to the bathroom as many times as we need to without having to worry about getting dirt on the carpet. So this is a new experience for Nick and Carrie. It shows us as well, Nick, we have a good idea for. He's having a hard time taking care of himself. So it shows us a little bit about an added pressure that Carrie is finding herself under. So I'd like you to consider that when you answer today's questions. All right. Well, I didn't get to see you, but I hope that it did some good to hear me reading to you. And I will go upload this video right now. And if it works out, I'll be able to read the chapters as we go along. But again, I want you to remember that we're going to go really, really slowly with this book because I want to make sure that everybody's understanding it. You're doing excellent, excellent work by yourselves at home, so you should feel really proud of yourselves. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon, and I'll be looking forward to reading to you again tomorrow. All right, well, have a good day. Send me your emails if you have any questions, if there's something you don't understand. I will be sitting at my computer until 2 o'clock, so I'll answer you as soon as I get your emails. Okay, good. Well, have a good day, work hard, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.